నమస్కారం అండి ఈరోజు ఎన్ఆర్ఐ పంచాయతీకి మీకు అందరికీ స్వాగతం. టుడే వీ హ్యావ్ వెరీ డిస్టింగ్విష్డ్ గెస్ట్ విత్ us, Chivukula garu and Nancy. Both of them are very distinguished Democrats in New Jersey, and I will let them introduce themselves and then we'll go into our topic. The topic for today is Comey firing. FBI Director Comey was fired by Trump, and how he was fired and why he was fired, what are the circumstances that were previously and then post the firing that take place, and how it's going to impact the general scenario from a common man's perspective, common person's perspective. And then we talk about Affordable Care Act, which is going to affect everybody, and how we live and how we function our day-to-day lives and what we need to do. So these are two big topics that we'll going to cover. First, Nancy, please explain, tell about yourself to our viewers.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Assemblywoman Pinkin, and I represent the 18th Legislative District in New Jersey. So East Brunswick, Edison, Metuchen, Helmetta, Highland Park, South River, South Plainfield. And my expertise, my professional background is in healthcare, and I've worked in that for many years, and now I serve on the Healthcare Committee in the Assembly, Law and Public Safety, and Homeland Security Committees.
Okay, sir, please.
Upendra Chivukula, I'm currently serving as a Commissioner on the Board of Public Utilities. Prior to that, I was serving as Assemblyman, Deputy Speaker for the Assemblyman for 12 years. And before that I was councilman, mayor in Franklin Township, and it's an electrical engineer by profession, and made the transition from private life into public life, and representing the South Asian community in the United States, and I hold the distinct honor of being the first elected South Asian Assembly member in New Jersey, and I take great honor and privilege serving the community here.
Wonderful, sir. And most importantly, he is also from the same community that I am. He is also a Telugu person, and that's we all feel proud about Chivukula garu.
Andaru ప్రేక్షకులకి నమస్కారం.
Namaskaram. TV5 ప్రేక్షకులకి నమస్కారం.
And the highest ranking
highest ranking, yeah.
in New Jersey.
So it's a wonderful thing to have you both with us. Now, how do you want to go? Do you want to talk about Affordable Care Act?
Yeah, we'll start with that.
Affordable Care Act, okay. So now with the Trump Care, okay, let's talk about Obamacare. What do you think was wrong with the Obamacare? What do you think was the problem with the Obamacare?
Well, first of all, I don't call it Obamacare, I call it the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
And one of the important things is that for many years we've been trying to increase the coverage for more people. Under the Affordable Care Act, 20 to 24 million more people have been covered, which is something we've been striving to do for many years. Now, New Jersey had a lot of the changes in place before the Affordable Care Act was started. We already had a mandate for not having policies that were sold. One of the problems is policies were sold, but they really didn't provide real coverage. When you really went for the basic care, they weren't included. So New Jersey put in a mandate that they had to cover certain things. One of the things that you hear talking about with the new plan, or the MacArthur Amendment, if you want to call it that, under President Trump, is that they want to change the ratings right now. And
you're talking about the new law that's coming in.
Right, the new law. One thing
Right.
that they're trying to do in the amendment is they're trying to change some of the things that were in place in New Jersey and then under the Affordable Care Act. Now, one thing, a very major thing, probably the most major thing, is the fact that people could get health care if they're sick. Now, when are you going to need health care? You're going to need it when you're sick, mostly. So if you have a policy that doesn't cover when you're sick, then what is the point of having the policy? That is the most basic principle. And the basis of insurance is to take many people and spread the risk and spread the cost over a lot of people. The less people you have in an insurance program, the more it's going to cost overall if people are using the program for, let's say, for health care. So while we knew the undertaking of creating a plan like the Affordable Care Act was not going to happen overnight. We knew it would take years to kind of settle out and fix the problems and kind of even out the finances, let the actuaries recalculate as they went along and saw how the usage went. But if you take out the people with pre-existing conditions, they're the ones who need the coverage the most. The other thing is that the Affordable Care Act had a mandate that everybody had insurance. Now, when you think about it, in New Jersey, we have to have insurance for a car. Why is it that we would have to have it for our car, but not for people? That doesn't make any sense. It's backwards. We're covering the cars, but not the people. So the point of getting everybody to have a mandate was to have them come into the market. The more people that are in the market, the lower the costs will go, because it will spread the cost.
And one of the important things about Affordable Care Act is that trying to provide universal health care.
You were talking about the existing,
the old law.
Older
I mean, it still is the existing law, because the new law has not passed.
Has not become the law.
Right. So, this whole concept started when Teddy Roosevelt was the president. They were talking about this thing. Subsequently, President Nixon talked about it, President Clinton talked about it, and under President Obama, we were able to address this particular issue in that nearly about 40 million people, and this particular legislation that was, of course, it was passed along the partisan line. Only the Democrats voted for it, and that was the major setback for that, and people criticized, Republicans criticized, trying to provide access for 32 million people to have the access to health care. And what are the challenges that people are having? Okay, first of all, as my colleague Nancy Pinkin said, that a lot of the young people opted not to have health care. So when your health care is insurance is spreading the risk. And when you have the most healthy people not in the health pool, what happens, only the sick people are there, the costs are going to be higher. That's one of the things that was addressed in the Affordable Health Care Act. Then one of the major problems that people were having is that with the economic conditions, more and more young people were staying with their parents.
Yes.
And that was addressed in that Affordable Health Care Act. Children up to the age of 26, they could staying with their parents, and they are able to get the coverage.
Previously, it was only till 18, I think.
Yeah, I think until 18 it increased to it increased up to age 26, so that more people are able to get the healthcare coverage.
True.
Second important thing is that I know I talked to one person, American citizen, who was working in Japan, and she could not come back to United States. I said, why you could not come back to United States? She said, I have pre-existing condition. In Japan, they cover my health care, whereas in the United States, they don't cover it. Under the Affordable Health Care Act, the pre-existing conditions. Pre-existing condition can be a pregnancy. They consider that.
Even pregnancy is considered pre-existing.
A mental
During
health
the period of that coverage.
Yeah. So suppose you leave one employer and you go to another employer.
Yeah,
and
Corba coverage should be
so
there.
then that also becomes pre-existing condition. So there are a lot of flaws in the insurance system. So Affordable Health Care Act was addressing that. The another interesting thing is that there was insurance companies had a lifetime cap. Suppose I have certain things and I'm only allowed to get so much insurance. Beyond that, suppose somebody, let's say, somebody's spouse gets sick and they spends a lot of time in coma, and once the lifetime cap is exceeded, that person has to go and borrow money on the home mortgage or borrow personal loan.
Most of the bankruptcies are medical bankruptcies.
Because of that.
It's over 50%.
So it was
Over 50%.
These are the 4 pillars, I think 4 important things. Okay, children under the age of 26, then a lifetime cap, then addressing the issue of pre-existing conditions. I think these are some of the things that the portability, between these things were addressed under the Affordable Health Care Act. And in order to do that, I think there was a mandate that was put in. Everybody should have health care, and so there was an IRS check that was put in.
Yes.
And there was went to the court system. The judicial system decided that we cannot mandate, and so there was challenges that were made. but I think overall what it has done is people can go into the exchange. There were exchanges formed, and there's a national exchange, the healthcare.gov, and also the states had the opportunity to create their own exchanges. And New Jersey, one of the states that opted not to have healthcare exchange in the state, but they had the option to use the national exchange.
Health Republic is there.
Yeah, healthcare.gov. That's that's the exchange that they were able to use. And another important aspect of the Affordable Health Care Act is that they were given the Medicaid. A lot of the people who are 175% of the federal poverty level, they can get health care coverage under Medicaid. So they were giving some money from the federal government. This is called Medicaid expansion. So there were money that was coming in to subsidize. So people who are slightly above working poor, above 175% of the federal poverty level, were able to cover under the Medicaid expansion. That was there. There were some subsidies that were given. So these are some of the things that will benefit a lot of people, especially people who supported Donald Trump in his election. They were the ones who are billing. If you really look at it, a lot of the Hillary districts, people who supported Hillary, they were people were getting money from the Hillary districts and subsidizing the people from Trump districts. Now with the new law that they are trying to pass, that the money from the Trump districts are going to go and help Hillary districts. So the reason is that it is basically, I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory, but it is the Republicans have an agenda. The agenda is that they want to have the tax reform and come up with the biggest tax cuts for the
tax rebates,
right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it costs
requires lot of revenue.
lot of money. So I think the first step in that is to eliminate all the subsidies that are given under the Affordable Health Care Act. So that way that can be used. So that way you can convince the Senate, hey, look, you have to give these tax cuts to these billionaires and multi-millionaires, and that is the first step. That is what it is when Speaker Ryan stands up there and we are going to make this available to everybody. I think that is what the underlying principle in that. So what it has done, and of course one of the good things that happened under this administration is that people who are coal miners who have black lung disease and all that, their insurance coverage is continued, which is a good thing that has happened. Now what we need to look at is that they are eliminating Medicaid expansion. That means they said, okay, there's an objection to that, and to satisfy the objection, the last minute they put in $8.5 billion into that, so that way for 5 years, $8.5 billion for 5 years.
So how much is the total healthcare budget, if we have to say?
On the federal level, I really don't have a number for that, but I'd be happy to.
It is a work in
provide it for
progress.
you.
We don't know
Yes,
what bill, right?
Okay.
What bill.
But in general, it will be in hundreds of billions of dollars.
Well,
Yeah.
they say that for the $8 billion that they put in, they thought it might be up to 130 or 40 billion.
Over a
That
period
might
of
be
10 years or
required,
5
but they're
years?
only going to be putting in 8 billion, so they don't feel that will be enough to cover the cost.
Question is that what happens after 5 years, right?
Right.
And then a lot of people who are just about the 175% of the federal poverty level, let's say, I heard cases where they have a lady who had a brain tumor, and she'll be kicked out of that because both herself, she cannot work because of brain condition. Her husband is unemployed. They live in New York, Long Island, and he cannot. So what happens to them? They get kicked out. There is no other coverage. Now, a lot of the federal government, the Republican Congress wants to shift it to the states. Okay, states will have the option. They can provide whatever they want. So what is going to happen is that states already have a burden called charity care. They have to put a lot of money. The New Jersey state, it's about $700 million or so they put in for charity care. The numbers change year to year depending on how many people seek out the charity care. So what happens, people don't have the insurance, they cannot get insurance, they end up going to the medical emergency room. So emergency room, you go there, the things that can be taken care in a primary care, let's say it costs $200, the emergency room, it will cost you $2,000 or $4,000.
Easily.
So you are actually increasing the cost.
Cost.
I think it's penny wise, you know.
And pound foolish.
Yeah, pound foolish. That is what it is being done. It is being packaged as, you know, we are giving you more choice, whether you, whatever the MacArthur Amendment and they are talking about, it's all about saying that we are going to give you all, right now, there are problems. Let's talk about the challenges.
Existing problems that Obama.
One of the things,
Affordable Care Act.
President Trump during the campaign, he talked about, oh, we are going to make it insurance companies go across the border and they can sell the insurance. There is no, there is nothing stopping them from doing that. It is by states. If the states can decide whether they want to allow multiple companies to come in, and they can do that. There's nothing, federal government cannot do anything about it. There's nothing.
So why did Aetna pull away from the existing?
I think the key here is that the premiums are, you know, they are
one problem
the premiums.
I found out by talking to people was a normal family, they pay their premiums every month, and the deductibles are like $500 or $600, and when they go to the doctor and come back, they'll have to pay again the money because it doesn't
part
fall
of the
under
problem with the Affordable Care Act has been the deductibles. One of the things that
for a family it is like $4,000.
Right. Well, one of the things that happened was they said, okay, well, we're going to raise the. They sort of took a combination of programs. They said, we're going to raise it. We're going to take the healthcare savings account idea where you can put money away tax free, and you'll raise your premium, and then you'll pay less. But then in raising the premium, for example, for a pregnancy, they might have raised the premium where you have to pay a couple $1,000s. So now you find out you're, you know, usually at the earlier point of your life when you're going to have a baby,
right.
And you all of a sudden now have to pay the premium, and you have to pay the high deductible, which ends up being like $5,000.
For a family, it's like $5,000.
Right.
Yes.
So then now that means that they're paying the whole entire thing at the point that they're having a new baby, and they're going to be out of work because they're taking care of the baby. And that was a flaw in the system. That was something that we knew would have to be adjusted. But I want to say one thing about in New Jersey, what we did, and not before the Affordable Care Act, we said, you know what, let's try to get more young people in the market. So that's when they came up with the idea of adding people to age 26. Now, the insurance companies in the hearings in New Jersey fought it tooth and nail. But we said, look, we're not asking you to give this to people for free. The parents are still going to pay the premium. The employer had to pay nothing. They would just be able to come in at a group rate, because usually actuaries, it's usually a lower premium when it's a group rate, because
Yes.
they're assuming that it's not a
And not all in
pre-existing
the group are
condition.
also covered. They
Right.
just give some number,
And-
and that number is not the whole universe of that group. And then few people get it, few people don't get it. So it's
And
it's
at
up
that
in the air.
time, they said, which is sort of one thing that you hear people talking about now, they said, we don't really want to cover the women. We just want to cover the men, the young men, not the
The
women.
insurance companies said
Yeah,
that?
because this is what they testified. And we said the legislators, some of the female legislators, primarily being Senator Gill and Senator Weinberg, said, well, women didn't get pregnant by themselves, so how is that fair? So you have to cover both. But they liked it so much that they actually expanded it in New Jersey to age 31. The only thing is you couldn't be married, and you had to live in New Jersey, but you didn't even have to live with your parents. And it brought a lot of young people in the market, and again, that helps spreading the risk.
Right.
So it was a really great program. People really liked it.
Okay. So right now with the new act, so to our viewers, there are a lot of points have been discussed, but most important is that pre-existing conditions and the spread of the risk of insurance. That is, instead of 10 people paying $100, if you have 100 people paying $100, then you have $10,000 in the pool, and that can serve all the 100 people. Because not all 100 people will be sick at the same time. So that spread is very important because it will help the insurance fund the individual cases when they get sick. So
also healthy people. Yeah, you have healthy people, and not only the old and sick. And I think it affects the disabled people. So you have the disabled people, the people with autism, Down syndrome, and all the things which they have much more
Need for
healthcare
this,
costs,
yes.
need for that. Have older people, different health issue that they need. Whereas young people, they until the age of 30 or so, 30, 35, their
Or even
requirements
50.
are less.
Yeah,
40,
even
50, they are much because of the different dynamics. They
Lifestyles
have
and
less
other things, yes.
less things that are
True.
needed.
Well, the young people still need insurance. They generally, the things that come up are more difficult situations, like they could come up with some type of cancer, right? And if they get that, that would be a very big expense. They could be have some type of trauma, and usually when they're young and they're healthy, their bodies are healthy, but when they have a trauma, it's very expensive because they don't die, but the rehab and the recovery is,
The ongoing expenses are huge.
yes, are very long. Now, one of the things that they said with the plan, like if they go back to the old ways, it's going to cost the average person with a pre-existing condition, their premiums were as high and will go back to as high as $25,000 a year, which is unaffordable. And that's, you have
That's
to...
like having another job.
Exactly.
And they will go bankrupt. Basically,
Yeah.
that's what happens. And then they depend on things like charity care, and the burden will shift to the.
And like you
states
said,
and
they'll go to emergency care instead of primary care.
Now, when you talk about the mandates, the previous plan under the Affordable Care Act had to cover certain basic things. But once you strip those out, those people with the chronic conditions, they're the ones who need the medication. They're the ones who need the other services that are driving up care. Some people say, well, they'll establish a high-risk pool. Now, in New Jersey, and probably during your time as a commissioner, when you were in the assembly, we had high-risk pools for car insurance. We had an auto insurance crisis at the time. They put people into the high-risk pools, but that takes more of the people out of the regular program, so then you're not spreading the risk as much, and those plans tend to go bankrupt. The state generally, or the federal government, can't afford to keep them going because everybody in it has...
Even though the premiums are high.
Yes, because they're basically subsidizing, so you're better off to keep more people in the general plan.
Oh, okay. So the new plan has got different pools, I believe.
They want to shift to the pools, which
pools.
we're not the only state that tried that before, and it didn't work. It ended up where they discontinued them. They said some states like Illinois and California had high-risk pools, and people had huge waiting lists to get into the pool because they didn't have any money. So,
And problem with the pool is all the insurance companies want to put you into the high pool rather than into the normal pool, because they will then say,
Yeah,
I
and
need
then
this test, this thing,
Also,
you have to be
could
like
wait,
this.
you will be waiting. And in the meantime, you may die.
exactly,
that
if you
is
can't
not-
get into
With
the
a big,
pool.
That's not acceptable.
It's a way of rationing care, really.
yes.
rationing care, and also it's also treating different age groups differently. The age penalty, which is well, if you listen to the American Association of Retired Persons, there are tremendous concern among the senior population as well as the disabled population. They are the ones who need a lot of help, and then we are hurting them more with these new ideas.
So do they think like that? So
Well,
the retiree population and people who are past their retirements for long years, do they really think that the new Trump care, let me call it, is going to affect them, and are they furious? Did you talk with them?
Well,
Did you have their
Right now,
interaction?
under the existing plan, there's a community rating, which means you have to rate everybody the same or within a narrow band. And if they take that off, then obviously the more care you're using, the more your costs are going to go up, and then that's going to make it unaffordable for those people that need the insurance. Again, what's the purpose of having insurance? It's to cover you when you're sick and to spread the risks. So it concentrates the risk. It's not almost could be looked at in a way of kind of making a pool in that sense, because they would be able to be charged a much higher rate, and it would be then it just would be not affordable for them.
So yeah, it wouldn't be financially very burdenous to them, But what
And
are
usually
they?
that's at the point that
Oh,
your
yeah,
salary.
there's a lot of lobbying, a lot of advertisement that come on TV. A lot of senior citizens are concerned about that. Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's
okay.
at the point that your salary is going down because you're not working anymore, and
Right.
obviously your health care costs are going to pretty much guaranteed go up because you're going to have things that happen as
No,
you
you
get
have
older.
Medicare and Medicare, but I think some of the senior population they're making choices between buying food or buying medication. Medication is very expensive. You know, you have the Part D for the Medicare. You have a lot of challenges. I think you are making it more difficult for them.
Oh,
Now,
okay.
now, some
Okay.
people will suggest why not just privatize the whole thing? But Medicare has, in fact, just today on the Kaiser Family Foundation website, it was talking about are the Medicare and the Medicaid insurance programs stable compared to private insurance, and they're actually more stable. They've actually had lower increases. They had, like, I think it was 15 to 19%, and then for private it was 21%. So the average Medicare rate for running the program, they have a 4% margin, a 4% profit, if you want to call it profit. Government doesn't make a profit, but they have a 4% admin fee that covers their expenses. Most insurers, it's about 25%. So privatizing Medicare would be one of the worst things to do because that has been a very stable program.
So we have these two different planks. The Democrat plank that Nancy Pelosi is saying is that healthcare is a right, and the Republican plank, which Paul Ryan says, is that you should be able to choose the kind of healthcare you want, and based on that, you have to pay for the healthcare. So one is the right, the other one is the luxury or the utility kind of thing. So where do you guys stand?
No, I think you know the question is that if you do not have health care, what are the consequences? That's what you have to look at. Is you're going to pay one way or the other.
Right.
Now, what is the best way to pay for it? I
Yes.
think if we can, you know, Nancy and I both agree that if we can create that a larger risk pool, and then you want to spread the cost across the people and try to cover as many people as possible, and try to see how you can. I think you have to cut down the overall costs of providing the healthcare insurance. I mean, there are costs associated. There are a lot of defensive medicine that is being practiced. Maybe you have to rein in on
avenues,
those
yes.
costs, and nobody is talking about that. I think there's a strong insurance lobby. There's other types of lobbies are there, and so people don't want to. I think they're touching everything on the periphery. They need to get into the deep down into it, and this has become a political football. Healthcare should not be a political football, but rather, you know, you need to have a holistic solution because it affects people's lives. It is not something, you know, if we are 65, 75 years old, or if you are disabled.
Which you will become anyways.
Yeah. No, if you are,
Everybody will
no,
become
if you are
60 years
disabled-
sometime.
Hopefully, if they have good
no,
health
if you are
care.
disabled, you are a veteran, you come here, you're disabled, right? You have some mental illness, right? You have nobody to
Down
take care of
syndrome,
you.
PTSD.
Now, does it matter whether it's right or you have a choice? What choice do I have? You know, I don't have a mental stability to be able to decide, and you are going to ask me to make me choose something which I don't have any income. I don't have a job. So I think it's very, I think there you need to look at it much broader, and you look at it, I think there is a sort of it's a responsibility that we need to look at carefully.
Right.
You know, and I think, you know, people forget that years ago, there was a program called the Hill-Burton program, and that was set up, and the government said, if hospitals are if the hospitals are allowed to get government funding to build a hospital, then we're going to say, if you accept that money, you have to take people no matter what. So we have so many systems in place that's doing cost shifting. So that's where you have, if you don't provide the primary care and take care of things while they're less expensive, then you're going to end up in the hospital, and as Commissioner said, it's going to cost more. There was a physician in New Jersey who's famous now. He got an award, Dr. Brenner, and they call it the Genius Award. It's given out nationally. It's very prestigious. But he said he was providing primary care in Camden, And he actually went bankrupt because he could not stay afloat on the amount of money that they were paying for him to see the low income patients. All of his patients were low income. What he did was he did a lot of data analysis proving that his patients were going into the hospital, and they called them frequent flyers. Each individual patient was costing $500,000 a year because they kept going to the emergency room when they really needed a primary care doctor, and he showed how much more it costs us to do care that way. And that's why we want to get away from the cost shifting, because as the commissioner said, we're paying for it one way or the other. We have to right size it and get it